Dan Orlovsky just said something on national TV that Ravens fans are going to be talking about all the way to kickoff. Not a soft take, not a maybe, a flat-out claim about how far this team can go in 2026, coming from a guy who studied football for a living his whole career. But before you get too excited, here's the catch. In that same breath, Orlovsky pointed straight at two parts of this roster that could blow the whole thing up. So which is it, Ravens fans? Is this team really built for what he's predicting, or is there a crack in this roster big enough to bring it all crashing down? Here's exactly what Orlovsky said on First Take. With Lamar Jackson healthy, the Ravens can get to the Super Bowl. There's no doubt about it. This is a very good football team. Read that again. No hedging. No, if things break right. Just a flat statement that this roster, with a healthy Lamar under center, has what it takes to make a run all the way to the Super Bowl. Coming off a season where we watched from home during the playoffs, that's a heavy statement to put out there. Orlovsky isn't some random talking head either. He's a guy who broke down tape as a player, and now does it every week on national TV. So when he says no doubt about it, that phrase carries weight with people who take these predictions seriously. I'll be straight with you. Hearing that gave me a jolt of confidence I haven't felt in months. After a year that ended with more questions than answers, having a respected analyst plant a flag like that on our team feels good. It's the kind of statement that gets clipped and shared everywhere, and we needed something like that heading into camp's final stretch. But Orlovsky wasn't done there, and this is where things get a little more complicated. He didn't just throw out a bold prediction and walk away. He immediately followed it up with concerns of his own, and those concerns are worth sitting with before we get too far ahead of ourselves. Orlovsky pointed straight at the offensive line, calling out that Baltimore is running with a new interior offensive line heading into the season. That's not a small detail buried in a stat sheet. The interior line is the engine room for everything Baltimore wants to do, whether that's protecting Lamar in the pocket or opening up the run lanes this offense has always leaned on. New faces up front change the chemistry teams need to build over an offseason. Communication, hand signals, picking up stunts and blitzes, all of that takes reps together, and it's the kind of thing that doesn't always show up clean in preseason snaps. With one preseason game left against Washington, Baltimore is running out of live reps to smooth those rough edges before the games start counting. Here's why this one worries me more than most position battles. Lamar's game lives on his legs as much as his arm, and every scramble, every extended play, depends on that interior line holding up just long enough for something to open downfield. If those interior guys are still figuring each other out in week one, that's not a minor issue. That's the whole operation getting shakier than we like. There's a reason Orlovsky brought this up in the same breath as the Super Bowl talk, because it's tied directly to whether that prediction actually has legs. A shaky interior line doesn't just hurt the run game. It changes how aggressive this offense can be. And that connects straight to another concern Orlovsky flagged that Ravens fans need to hear about. Beyond the offensive line, Orlovsky didn't stop digging. He said flat out that the wide receiver room is probably the biggest question mark on this entire roster. Coming from a guy who just said this team can reach the Super Bowl, that's a pretty significant crack to point out in the same conversation. Baltimore did make a real move here this offseason, locking up Zay Flowers with a massive contract extension. That tells you the front office believes in him as the guy Lamar leans on. Flowers has earned that trust with how he's produced since he stepped into the league. And paying him says the Ravens see him as a foundational piece of this offense going forward. Here's the catch, though, and it's the part Orlovsky is clearly zeroed in on. Once you get past Flowers, the depth chart thins out fast. There isn't another proven, established difference maker sitting behind him, and that's a real gap for a team with Super Bowl aspirations. One great receiver can carry an offense on good days, but defenses eventually figure out how to take away your best option if he's the only one they truly have to respect. That's the tension running through this entire prediction. Orlovsky sees enough talent and system to get to the Super Bowl, but he's also naming the exact areas that could keep it from happening. And when you connect a thin receiver room to an offense that's already leaning heavily on one player's legs to make plays, you start to see how all of this ties back to the guy who makes everything go, Lamar Jackson himself. Which brings us to the part of this equation that matters more than anything else Orlovsky mentioned. His entire prediction hinges on one condition stated right up front. With Lamar Jackson healthy, That's not a small qualifier. That's the whole ball game, because we all watched what happened when he wasn't healthy in 2025. Lamar missed a significant chunk of last season dealing with a hamstring injury, and anyone who watched those games without him felt exactly how different this offense looks when he's not out there extending plays. This isn't a team built to simply plug someone else in and keep rolling the same way. Lamar is the engine, and when the engine sits, the whole machine changes. Here's the part that stings a little to say out loud. Lamar isn't a young quarterback anymore, and his game has always been built on speed, burst, and the kind of athleticism that takes a physical toll over time. Every defender he juked in the open field, every extra 10 yards he picked up with his legs, that adds up across a career, and the clock on that version of Lamar doesn't run backward. That's exactly why the interior line concern and the receiver depth concern matter so much when you stack them next to Lamar's health. A shaky interior line means more hits absorbed. A thin receiver room means more improvisation asked of him instead of easy completions elsewhere. Every one of those factors either protects Lamar's body or puts more strain on it, and that connects directly to whether the Super Bowl talk has a real chance of playing out. Still, if you step back and look at where this roster stands when everything lines up the way it's supposed to, it's not hard to see why Orlovsky went as far as he did. Baltimore still is one of the most dangerous defenses in the league, and now there's a fresh voice running that side of the ball with new head coach Jesse Minter taking over. Minter stepping in changes more than just who's calling the shots on defense. New coordinators bring new wrinkles, new pressure packages, new ways of disguising coverage, and a defense with this much talent could get even harder to prepare for under fresh leadership. Pair that with Lamar at full strength as an MVP caliber player, and you're talking about a team with legitimate top-tier pieces on both sides of the ball. I'll admit, when you put it all together like that, Orlovsky's confidence starts to make a lot more sense. An elite defense, one of the most electric players in football at quarterback, and a coaching staff hungry to prove itself after last year's disappointment. That's a recipe for a real contender if the pieces around Lamar hold up their end. This is exactly why September 13th matters so much beyond just being week one. That's the day Baltimore opens the season against the Indianapolis Colts, and it's the first real chance to see whether this version of the Ravens looks like the Super Bowl contender Orlovsky described, or whether those question marks about the line and the receiver room show up the way we're all worried they might. So here's where this leaves us heading into that opener. Dan Orlovsky put his name behind a bold, confident claim that with a healthy Lamar Jackson, this Ravens team can get all the way to the Super Bowl, no doubt about it in his words. That's not a small thing coming from someone who studies this league closely for a living. But he backed that claim up with real concerns, too. A brand new interior offensive line, still finding its footing, and a receiver room that's thin the moment you look past Zay Flowers. Both of those issues connect straight back to Lamar's health and how much weight he has to carry for this whole offense to function the way it needs to in order to make that Super Bowl talk mean something come January. What do you think, Ravens fans? Do you agree with Orlovsky that this team can get to the Super Bowl if Lamar stays healthy? Or do those question marks about the offensive line and receiver room worry you too much? Drop your take in the comments and let me know exactly where you land on this one.
And if you're a true Ravens fan and love keeping up with everything happening around the team, don't leave this video without sharing it with a friend who's just as passionate. They're definitely going to enjoy this. See those videos on your screen right now? I picked the first one especially for you, and the other is recommended by YouTube. Go check them out, and I'll see you in the next video.